for anybody that doesn't want to stand up for the whole time, there are seats up front. I know it's the very scary place to sit. Oh, way to be brave. Yay. Yay.
Scary.
I am. It also gives me confidence that my breath isn't so horrible either if you sit up front. Yay. Well, welcome everybody. Hi, it happened. We're here. There was a storm and there was a change of plans, and yet we're all here. And I'm really, really grateful for y'all showing up to hear me yammer for a chunk of time about this body of work. And okay, Cal, because I know you, and will you be my person to tell me if my voice starts to go quiet and you can't hear me in the back? Okay, great. Awesome. That'll help my peace of mind. Okay, so I'm just going to be straightforward. This was, for anybody that's heard me do artist talks in the past, when I formatted them, I really, really like a nice linear storyline of things. And this talk did so not want to be that. And it's been a bit of a tricky wicket of how to incorporate just the years of making this body of work and the different styles of work and everything. So I feel like this talk is going to be a little bit of a collage-y experience of things. See what I did there? So clever. So the hope of it might feel a bit disparate, and in the end, will coalesce into one wonderful experience that makes sense. Huh. Are you with me? Yes. Excellent. Wonderful. So kind of the arc that I'm going to touch on is a little bit of how I approach my process. There's going to be some technique, a bit of dreams of while this body of work was coming together, what I was thinking about, and also just a bit about my approach to self-portraiture in general, and why the hell do I want to put myself in front of a camera and over and over again and share a lot about myself. And so that's where we're going to start, is what brought me to self-portraiture and how it shaped my photography practice. So there is one tiny little chair up here if somebody wants to be brave and sit. Okay. So around 2016 is when, with my social group and more publicly, began changing my pronouns, my name, my presentation, everything, and self-portraiture was the means for me to create a container that felt safe and private to ask a lot of questions. This is the gift that self-portraiture has given me, to explore things, to poke and interrogate certain things that I've internalized of what I've been told is true, and go, is it actually, do I believe in that, and why are things structured this way? And that has been centered around gender roles, gender norms, gender stereotypes, all of those things. And that was really the focus of the last body of work. For those of you who know, who don't know, that was called As I Am. And it was really a place that self-portraiture gave me to ask a lot of questions of how I see myself in relation to what I've been told my skills are, what my desire should look like, what my sexuality should look like, my attire, the ways that I adorn myself, the way I present to the world, and even my emotions, right? And it was a whole process of digging into those questions via self-portraiture, of asking why and trying to take things that I had internalized weren't for me and say, well, can this exist? Can't I exist with this thing? Can I have relationship with this thing? And does it come with a price, really? Which is also the safety bit of being able to do it in my own home studio and doing self-portraiture. Because it did feel really risky to be asking these questions in the first place. Which, and I completely forgot, usually when I do an artist talk or I do a speaking engagement, one of the first things I say to the people when I talk to is, the things that I say, the images that you see, what have you, I invite you to notice your reactions to them. There is no wrong way to take in the work, whether it be confusion or excitement or affirmation or laughter or disgust. I always invite people to notice what their initial reaction is. And then I put on my major teacher voice and say, and you get bonus points and a gold star if you then ask yourself why or where that's coming from. And the reason I ask that is, A, to give people permission to kind of dig into their own reactions, their own internalized narratives around gender and gender norms, but it's also a way of inviting people into my process of what it is and what has guided me of, at least in that first body of work, why I'm taking pictures of certain things, where I'm digging into. It always started with the question of why. Where did this thought come from? Where did this belief in myself and my abilities or non-abilities come from? And that's what shaped my understanding and how I approach photography in general. It started to shift once I started to do self-portraiture. Because the time where I kind of was learning photography in the early 2000s was when I was going to school, has shifted of how I approach how to pick up a camera, how I view my responsibility as the person holding the camera, and what I'm photographing. And that really shifted when I started to take pictures of myself. I did not want to take pictures of me. I did not want to take pictures of me or capture pictures of myself. I really wanted to try and see what it was to witness things of me and seek understanding. And of course you can be like, yep, there's the trans person going into linguistics of things, but truly how we talk about stuff affects how we think about it. And that is how I was taught to view photography, is that it was a fly on the wall to be distant from your subject or your object and to take photos. And that really shifted to understand what it was if I was photographing somebody else, what I was really asking if I was wanting them to be vulnerable in front of the camera. To show aspects and respect what they were comfortable showing and not showing. And I've definitely learned that through my self-portrait process. And that I am not a subject. The things that I bring into the frame with me to be photographs are not objects or subjects either. They are things that I want to understand what my relationship to them is, what my relationship to myself is, what my relationship to gender is, what my relationship with all these things that are so heavily coded are. And from there can go, how can I change that? How can I alter that? How can I have more authority with that? And through it, create a world I want to exist in, right? So there's a little bit of where I'm coming from. Yay. And how that kind of, went along the way into creating this body of work is, so that's where I was coming from. That was where I was starting to shift and how I was looking at things. And went to the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology out at Cascade Head for a residency that I got through Blue Sky for a month. And I went out there in 2020, and that belief system of engaging with my camera and honoring that process of what I decided to photograph was something I wanted to be in relationship with and understand and know, really influenced how I interacted with the landscape of Cascade Head. For the first 4 or 5 days, man, I tried taking pictures, I really did, and it really became, I needed to get to know the place. It was a whole lot of giving offerings. I brought herbs and plants from my own garden to give to places that felt special around where I was wandering around the land. And it was very much asking permission to collaborate with this landscape, to see what that could look like. Because I went in with the intention of what is it and how does my self-perception change if I am asking and curious to have the landscape be the mirror in which I see myself. How does that shift how then I view myself? How does that shift my relationship, not only to myself, but my relationship to place, right? So that was the intention that I went into it with. And I've always really, really loved the outdoors. I grew up camping a lot with my family. I grew up going on annual backpacking trips. So I've always had an affinity and a certain level of comfort being outside a lot. And I also went in with the understanding and also wanting to investigate while I was out there how the term natural can definitely be weaponized against people seen as other, whether that be through their sexuality or their gender or their body shape or their race or even their beauty standard. That is a whole other TED Talk soapbox I could get on unpacking the term natural beauty and what the fuck that means. There will be swearing. Sorry, YouTube. I went in also wanting to kind of unpack that and understand and pick apart that lie that to be natural is some type of exclusive thing that is given. I also came with all that love of the landscape and the outdoors that I got from a kid. I still went in with particular notions of what nature and the landscape and outside held. I had ideas in my head of what was going to be mirrored back to me while I was out there. And those were ideas of grandness, expansiveness, a certain form of picturesque, and if I'm honest, a certain amount of purity, a certain amount of an area that's untouched, right, by our human selves. And also, if I was honest, a place that was separate from me. I was a visitor, but not a part of it. So that's what I went into the very start of this work with all those things teaming around in there. And what I started to unpack or learn, or I guess you could even say remember, was how vastly complex everything out there in the outside is. It's so, the ecosystem of everything is so complex, is so vast. It's so fucking queer, actually, when you look at it. The line between one thing or another really, really begins to dissolve. Animals and so many plants living and being and existing outside of any gender system, or like having two different sexes even, like that was starting to blow my mind, and how much it defined a binary sense of things. And when I say that, of being like one or the other. The more that I started to walk around the land, really just notice and witness things. Like I said, the lines between what is death and what is life, and change and decay and growth, even what is big and small, became very blurred and flipped on its head. Meaning, I thought I was looking at something small, like a tiny little mushroom and fungus, when really it was this vast, humongous network of a being. And yet I would see this huge, gigantic tree, and when I would come to visit, God, 9 months later, that thing was on the ground and starting to go back into the earth. It just really typified for me how much, everything was in relationship to everything else. Everything was vital to create the ecosystem that was there, and it was in a constant state of change. And the reason that especially that last part really stood out to me when I was out there making this work, this idea of a constant state of change, is I remember early on feeling like once I changed my pronouns, once I changed my name, once I started to change, I needed to change and then really fucking stick with it. Like, it needed to be written in stone. I feel like there was a belief definitely that I internalized of certain flippancy of changing gender or changing presentation or changing my name, that it needed to be set in stone and it couldn't be mutable. Even the belief that I held of the way that I presented my masculinity, the way that my femininity came through, that had somehow needed to be consistent. And here it was the ecosystem and the landscape around me saying, no, where did you get that frickin' idea? No, everything is in a constant state of mutability, and it's all evolving into its next state of being, and that is what makes it a vital part of the ecosystem. That is what makes something thriving. If you're just staying in one place for like your same self, like what does that do for yourself, and what does that do to anybody else? If I was looking at it through that lens, right? I swear I will get to the images and the actual work in a sec. I really promise. So from there, that place, starting to understand that, and unpack all of those preconceived notions about things, myself in relation to landscape, what's my relationship to this place, myself in regards to change. What started to bubble up, rise up, was starting to notice, hold on, there's a particular thing I want to read, the difference between acceptance and belonging. Of starting to realize that what I feel like I was chasing a lot or trying to unpack in my work previously to this was looking for acceptance, conflating acceptance and belonging when actually they're two very different things. Acceptance being something that's outside of yourself, waiting for an outside force to deem you suitable to be included. And I was just starting to grapple with this topic while I was out there at Sitka. Which brings us to the next part of this talk, which is the story time aspect of this talk. Are we all? I'm really sorry I did not bring any pillows or blankets for anybody, but we are now ushering into the story time aspect of the artist talk. Yeah, okay, good, thank you, yay. Excellent. So that's where I was at, like, mentally, creatively, everything was pondering those things. The other thing that was happening while I was out there was I was having lots of dreams. And so I'm gonna share one of the dreams that really impacted and started to steer the work that I made after that. So my previous work that I was just talking about, a lot of it centered around things. A lot of it was sporting equipment or clothing or attire and things like that, and trying to rework them. And I brought a whole lot of stuff with me out to Sitka, and did not make any photographs with them while I was out there, really. The one thing that I did bring, and it was so on a last minute whim, I brought a elk pelvis that I had from home that I had found years ago, and I decided to bring it with me. And at the very last second, I took a piece of fabric to wrap it in there to protect it while I was packing up. And that piece of fabric was my grandmother's lace tablecloth. And I'm also a person that likes to sleep in a little closet. So I taped it up over my bed. So every morning I would look through it and watch the light shine through all of the patterns. And it had a rose pattern on the lace. And the light would shine through, and I would think about all of the stories and patterns and lineage that gets passed down, sometimes knotted into things you really need to pull on and undo and investigate. Anyway. So this is the thing that was surrounding what I was sleeping on, this lace tablecloth. And here's the dream. Here's the story time, is I am at a meeting hall or a gathering place, and my family is all there. And there's a side of my family, the Italian side of my family, so like 8 aunts and uncles, they all have kids, like gatherings with them was 20 plus people. So it was packed with everybody of them and their kids and their cousins and everybody, and I hadn't really seen or spoken to them at this point for probably 10-ish more years. And they were all there. And I remember thinking in the dream, oh, I'm not ready to engage with that, no, oh. But I did see my grandma, who is alive, and I went up to her, and that was a person I was willing to engage with. And I was like, hey, Grandma, it's me, your grandkid. And she looked at me and didn't see me, didn't recognize me. She was like, I'm sorry, I don't know you. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I know. I went by a different name, and I like told her my name, you know, that I was born with, and I went, hey, I'm so-and-so's kid, remember? Yeah? And she looked at me again, and she was like, no, I don't know you, but you seem like a nice man. And I turned around, like dealing with lots of feelings, feeling a bit heartbroken in the dream. And when I turned, I saw my grandfather, her husband, who died when I was 10, and at pretty big moments in my life comes to me in dreams. So he was there, and he didn't say a word. And all he did was open up his arms and gave me a big hug. And it was one of those, maybe you all know what that feeling is, but to have somebody hug you where you can really tell they could do it for as long as you need it. Do people, this is like this is like the second time in my life, and it was in a frickin' dream. that I had that of like, I could stay here for hours. I could stay here for days, and he would be willing to hold me. And it was amazing, and I cried in the dream and felt really loved. And when I was done, he just walked me over silently to a table where it was surrounded by other masculine-looking people, and they all looked similar to him. One of them looked like an old photo I had seen of my great-grandfather, who was my birth namesake. And if I could put a story to the people that I saw around that table, it was like seeing the masculine, the patriarchal line of my ancestry all sitting around a table and pulling up a seat for me to sit at. And they all looked at me like I could be that, like I was, for them, okay to be seen as the grandson. And I woke up with a lot of feelings, both rejection and acceptance. And about 5 days later, I took the tablecloth and made that image over there, which is I set my table for you, with the lace tablecloth of my grandmother's. And I was baptized Catholic as a child, and this felt like that photo, the start of what it is to bless myself, which later came into that photo with the mirror halo titled, "We Bless Ourselves." And even though it was such a good dream of feeling really, really, really loved, it did kind of poke at that fear I always had, which is, what's the price? If I'm to investigate and be who I am, what is the price? And I felt like that dream was kind of poking at that fear of like, you can have one, but not the other, in that binary way of looking at things, right? And that is where it really started to root deeply of what does belonging mean then? Because it sure as shit is not this. Of, even though it was such a beautiful, wonderful feeling to be embraced like that in my dream by like that whole line of my family, it was still somebody outside of myself saying, we deem you suitable and we will accept you into this thing, or we will reject you. And it really started to hone in that feeling of what is belonging, of finding something inside myself to say, I belong here and I belong here and I'm vital to everything around me. That it is a relationship. It is being with things, not waiting to be accepted. So one of the last images I made out at that residency, I also found, so I brought that piece of lace with me, and at a secondhand store, I found a piece of lace, which is that piece behind you with all of the lilies on it. And for me, lilies always represent that next generation of possibility. It makes me think of my own kiddo and what I want to pass down to them. That one's titled, Open to Your Inheritance. Insight, the titles come way later. There is no way I had the capacity to like wade through all of that and be like, yeah, this is what is going on. We are gonna make from this. No, it was lots of feels and intuitively taking pictures and then going back on them later being like, oh fuck, that's what we were unpacking with that one. This is what I was feeling. And oh my gosh, this is how I worked. This is how I have been working through that. And that continual, I guess, searching for what it means, I think I even thought of it as like trying to walk a path of belonging to myself, belonging to the environment around me, really started to take shape after I left that residency. It took shape in the book that's animated in that other room, of this feeling of having the audacity, I guess, to share all of these parts that were continually moving and didn't feel like they were stagnant and still in any way, and saying, and yes, and this is me existing with a place in relationship to place. I will also be honest, coming outside of that residency, being plunked into the midst of a pandemic and other things, it was like the next level of a challenge to go, yes. It's like getting a glimmer of going, I want to know what that feeling is and how to continually go back to that feeling, that belief of belonging. And that is a much more digestible task when I'm tra-la-laing in the woods by myself with like elk. It's grand, and it's a really different practice. Coming back and needing to stick to that when that idea and the belief of belonging and belief in relationship and belief in being vital to a human ecosystem was harder as, and continues, like it's not, I'm not saying this is like, I have arrived, this is my masterpiece, I belong, tra-da-da, here we are. It's a continual thing, especially as legislation is coming out continually every month, every year, more and more, to try and believe that when, depending on the state I might want to visit, I could be arrested on the bathroom that I visit. That my kid could be taken away if people think that I am a person that looks like will give gender-affirming care. It's also tricky to continually believe that when certain art spaces believe that my work is unsuitable for their walls, or that works that I make and I'm willing to pay to have printed, they reject because they need to protect their staff from my images. Or having a person that has an influence on my career and can show some of my work to other adults in universities and feels and debates the need of whether or not he needs to give a trigger warning before showing my work. It is very tricky and challenging to navigate that and still find and try and walk a path and the belief that I belong. It is really tempting from there to slip back into a game of wanting to try very hard for acceptance instead. Damn, is it really tempting to go, what can I do so you will allow me in? It's also really tricky when you are oblivious to plants for a moment and that emotional discomfort you feel shows up in the form of a really, really, really horrendous rash all over your body. That is also when the outside external forces are pressing in, and then internal forces, I am literally very uncomfortable. I can't even. Like my body, my skin was swollen about that far away from the contours of my body. I could not recognize myself. And it felt like it was all coming to a head. And again, that challenge of, Jesus, is this sacred? Do I belong when I feel like this and people are saying this and this and and that is what led me to the next evolution of this work, which was the collage work. It felt like a freedom that I started to find in the book of things continually moving. Like it could be, I can have all of these at once, and meaning I can having more than one head and more than one leg and more than one arms. I can in one hand hold love and in the other feel rejected. In one, I can hold complete and utter rage while also having space for joy in my own personal life. Like the collages held space for having the multiple things be possible. It kind of like what I was saying about my past notions of like the environment and the landscape and the pristineness and the purity and everything. When I started doing collage, it was like I was taking a thread out of those perfect, pretty representations of the world that was lace and all those stories, and just pulling on them and pulling on them and pulling on them and finding a new thread or a new path to be laid in a little line here and there. It was like trying to carve out and look to the landscape again and like find the language in the picture of a landscape that I took and find that line in there that was not perfect, it was not symmetrical, it was really topographical and organic and somehow meandering, and yet would lead me connecting one part of myself to another part of myself, right? It just felt like, it feels like actually when I'm doing collage, like it's always a bit of discovery. That's very exciting and makes space for so many things. And also mirrors in a way how I feel the landscape is, which is that it defies any form of a binary system. Like, is this photography? I don't fucking know. Is it a portrait? Is it a landscape? I don't know. And I'm actually not really interested in answering the question. It's really freeing, and it also feels like where before, and I think the work that I was making before was really, really vital and really integral to my development as an artist, and it was me trying to create a world I wanted to exist in, which I think is very, very important. And yet with this new evolution of the work, it feels like I am creating a space, a world, a landscape that I'm existing with. There is this weaving, there is this integral part for me of what it feels like to go, I am a part of an ecosystem. And it's a helpful thing when the news is really getting me down or rejections are really getting me down from art spaces or who knows what, to go into my studio and make these things and remember and find those paths in the lines or the things that I cut out or the things that I highlight to remember that truth that is like really easy for me to forget. And I also don't think I'm unique in this either. I think many people are on their own points of trying to find some sense of belonging in things also. I mean, I don't know, maybe y'all are a crowd of people that are like way more on top of it than me. But this new work and what it gives me is that reminder that this isn't a place for me to get to that place of belonging. It's not a place to wait for somebody else to give me. It's not a place that I need to be in a certain point in my life to arrive at. It is and has always been true. So I can go back to it anytime. And when I was making this talk, I was trying to be like, this is what collage is, this is what it means. And I remembered that in the catalog, that I think there's still copies left, I was really Thank you to Blue Sky also for printing the catalog. I was really grateful because I was able to work with a friend of mine who is a writer, an incredible writer, Callum Angus, and he wrote a guest essay for it and typified so brilliantly everything that I feel this next evolution of my art practice is. So I'm gonna share that with you, and then we'll open it up for questions. I highly recommend going and reading more of Cal's work. He has a book, Natural History of Transition, and you can find more of his writing at calangus.com. Incredible. Okay. The first sentence, which I frickin' love, collage is a trans medium. Trans and queer people are always collaging their selves and their histories, stitching together that which came before with that which has not yet been imagined, pasting ourselves into the nooks and crannies of the natural world and anywhere else we're told we don't belong. And I want to thank Blue Sky for giving me the space to fill every frickin' nook and cranny with all of the queer, trans, gender expansiveness that this body of work is. And thank you all for being here too.
Obviously, beautiful work. We're all here.
Thanks.
Stunning. Really love hearing you talk about it. I am curious because I got lucky in the eye.
Thank you. I was actually gonna.
I was like, yeah. As someone who's born Catholic and grew up queer, I find that imagery sneaks its way into my work pretty consistently. And looking here, I see divinity to the left a little bit, right? Just a little off center, a little like some biblically accurate angels. And I was wondering if that is, if divinity or if religion or if anything like that has snuck its way into this project.
I get casually.
Super easy question.
I don't know. I would say unconsciously, absolutely. Although I was baptized Catholic, I was not raised Catholic. It was always a bit of a mystery to me, like meaning being very young and going with my grandma to church, that and thinking it was this mysterious, awesome, cool thing where people went up and took the body of a person and ate it and drank it, and being like, whoa, but I don't get to, but they get to, what? And my favorite thing is when everybody went around and then shook everybody's hand and was like, peace be with you. Loved that as a kid. Also, sitting around the dinner table when we would go to Grandma and Grandpa's and having them all go through the prayer, which I could not recite because they would go through it lightning frickin' quick. So meaning that aspect of religion was kind of like in the periphery, I guess. And I feel in some ways I'm really, really, really intentional in most circumstances of when I'm using that iconography of divinity, mostly with the halo, right? Of when to put the halo and also where to put the halo. And it's again, that thing, the belief of I have the authority to bless myself, to call myself divine, to see also all beings, and all, not just humans, also as divine, which is a little bit more of my own spiritual practice of, I guess you could say more witchcraft, of believing that the elements, the landscape, and things like that is divinity, and having my respect put into that. And then it shows up in unconscious ways. So here, with these two things, with the two little bits on the palms, there is no part of me when I was taking that photograph, even when I was putting that book together, did it cross my mind that I had just put slight stigmata on my hands. So in unconscious ways it shows up, and then in conscious ways too. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Why, yes. Alice. Hi.
So in your installation next door, I noticed a little piece that was different than the rest, which was a little broken piece of a blue plate that was in the rest of there. And I was really curious if there was a story behind that.
You did that so casually. Props to you. Okay, full transparency. Alice, who is awesome and another amazing, amazing photographer, has a show coming up. At the opening, asked me this question. And I was all like, Alice, thank you so much for asking that. Because there's only so much I can fit into an artist talk. And I was like, can you ask that? Can you come to the artist talk and ask that question? That's a great question. Thank you. And I totally blew our cover. Dang. So the one piece, which is a piece of a plate that I found out at low tide at Sitka. When I came back from Sitka, I collect lots of broken shards of mirror, broken parts of glass, all things like that. And in one of those excursions where I was picking up lots of broken things, I think it was at a moment where I was also gathering moss for the installation actually, which, by the way, the whole thing of asking permission goes across the board to everything. So when I was gathering the moss, I only gather things that have fallen. I go off after storms to certain old roads. Like, I do not peel things off of the landscape and take it with me. It's always the really intentional of when I harvest things. Had to put in there. Okay, back to the question. That plate, when I was going on the old logging roads that I go on to look for moss, I was thinking about that plate, and I was thinking about that installation. And I was thinking about how there is that practice, which the name is escaping me, where you take, the things that are broken or chipped and put them back together in a beautiful...
Kintsugi.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And I was like, yes, that's a really beautiful practice. And then I thought, and sometimes things aren't meant to be put back together. What if it was a divine sacred thing for the pieces that went away and became their own things, that weren't supposed to be made, and they're not considered broken either. They are now their new own separate self. So, and that piece that I found out at Sitka really represented that for me, so that's what that is. Yes. Yeah. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking a lot about how acceptance wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Belonging was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious, with the use of nature and all of this,
Mm-hmm.
did you feel like you belonged in nature when you were making these photos? Were you accepted? Were you separate from nature? What was the relation?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I would say I belong in nature. I would say I am a part of nature. I think part of the understanding is that us as humans, we're horrible and bad and awful to the world, so we are, and in turn separating ourselves from them. And I'm like, yes, we have to kind of reconcile that with ourselves, what we are doing to our environment. Yes. And part of that for me is like, yeah, and an extension by what I'm doing, or what I'm partaking in, I am also doing to myself, because I am part of this ecosystem. I am not separate from it. The landscape and nature is not a place that I visit and then go back to. It is something I exist with. It's a relationship. It's something I'm in a relationship with. And so really when I say belonging is remembering that I'm a part of that vast network of a relationship, right? I hope that answers that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? What's next? What's next? What's next after this is I'm gonna rest and I'm gonna go dancing and all of that. I'm really intrigued in working with others, and I've already started that a bit, of doing collage with others. Can I say? Okay.
You're like,
Hi. Brittany Kathy Adams is somebody I've already worked with, also another self-portrait artist, to create collages with and in dialogue, and what it is to collaborate with somebody in working with them in a way that feels just that, like collaborative and expanding the conversation around this idea of otherness and belonging and all of those things, and the landscape. So that is something I'm interested in. And man, I would love to give you like the smartest, most well thought out intellectual answer, but I will be honest, most of the time when I approach work, it's what am I drawn to create and make, and then figure out where the heck it's coming from and what it's about later. So I will probably have an answer for you in a year-ish. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Do you keep a dream journal?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Well, you've got some good ones.
Yeah.
Have any others been inspired by dreams, or like snippets of feelings of waking up from a dream that made you proceed with any of these in particular?
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing with the dreams of I will start creating a work and then go back and be like, holy crap, it's that dream coming back to life, damn! So that salmon one is one of those. I was drawn in wanting to make a work about salmon because I really was inspired by the idea of them having that internal compass towards home, right, of where they came from. So I started that piece, and it wasn't until, I was like at my wit's end, getting very frustrated and being like, what do you want from me? Why aren't you? I couldn't figure out how to finish it. I remembered the dream that I had after the one I just shared with you all, which was meeting a whole bunch of very queer, gender expansive weirdos, for lack of a better word, and inviting me in, and we all shared food and had on all of our lovely outfits and talked about art and everything. Like it was that of remembering the landscape of people coming together. And the art that we were talking about was, crap, I can't remember the name of it, a fountain in Italy, where, like with all the fishies, with the water and the fountain. Does somebody know it?
Totally.
Thank you. I knew it started with a T. Yeah. So I feel like that was when I was like, oh my God, the fishes are coming back and the queerness and the thing. Yeah. That was a really eloquent way of me describing that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, I had to bring up the kitchen table argument that you and I had. It's coming back. Not an argument per se.
Uh-huh.
But I'm curious about this idea, like in your statements, there's a rejection of the idea that to show where you're at now is to literally depict the pain of the journey, and how you kind of navigate that thing you can't control, which is to make work to see yourself, but then also to know that you are being seen, and how pain plays a role in that.
So the question is, how do I navigate that?
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a continual practice, honestly. I think for me, I'm continually learning, having that sense of belonging to myself and not seeking acceptance helps create a little bit of a buffer with that. Having to remind myself that also another reason I create is that it is in service to something, and it is in service to what the viewer is at too, and wherever they're gonna go on it with their own journey of how the artwork is gonna speak to them. And also, I think it's been a continual reminder of not conflating praise just as much as like critique, not conflating those with acceptance, denial, belonging, that those are people's opinions, and I can disagree with their opinions, or that's their own baggage to unpack. But yeah, there's not a real clear answer. It depends on what time of day and what day it is and what day of the month and all that shit for different things. It's tricky. The line is always tricky of how much to share and how much of a wall to put up and when to take the wall down. And I might leave this talk feeling really great and being like, awesome, I feel so great about everything I shared. I might leave and be like, fuck, why did I share that? That was too much. I crossed my own line, and then I have to learn from it of what that is, of what things I want to keep to myself and what things are worth sharing because it can invite another layer for people to enter into the work. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
I love this piece, in the border, there's a double portrait.
Yeah.
Can you give me more comment? Talk about that.
Oh, of like how it came, together?
Yeah, how you
Yeah, that was near the end too. When I went to the secondhand store to get that piece of lace, I also found a mirror because all my ears were in pieces when I was out at Sitka. So I found that, and again did the went to the roads. They have a couple gravel roads around Sitka, and started to gather the moss and collect them that had fallen down off of the trees, and laid the mirror down and just shaped the moss around it on the rare non-rainy day in a way that was reflecting the trees. And that's technically how it was pulled off.
Your spiritual story, something deeper. It's not about.
Oh, you don't.
I don't care about that.
Thank God, because I'm always like, man, should I share more about like technique and blah, blah, blah? I'm just not interested about that. Whoa.
Open your
Ebenezer, if I may, I'd like to express a statement of gratitude for the worlding and space that you create as a person who has the honor of living with one of your artworks. There's something like deeply sacred in the way, as we've spoken about before, that you queer nature. And I just wanted to share that expression of gratitude.
Thank you.
It is definitely not an endpoint. I don't feel like it's linear. I feel like it's about being embodied and in relationship with land.
Yeah.
And I do have a question.
Yeah.
that I'm getting to. Your work really resonates with me as a part of the sacred lineage of Claude Cahun, the French photographer, performance artist. And I was just wondering if that is a thought that you thought about.
Yeah, Claude's work, Claude Cahun, is like one of my photographic heroes. I remember, or I still do, when at Halloween when we do a Day of the Dead altar, they're one of my like queer ancestors that I put on the altar. When I started making this work, not this work, the earlier work, and feeling so tender and risky, I would put pictures of Claude's work up as a way to give me courage in order to share things. So yeah, their work is very impactful on mine. And also, challenge accepted at us for the mirrors. If what was going through my head in the mirrors in general, and I don't think I'm the only person that has this experience, which is, depending on the day or whatever, to look at them in the mirror at yourself can be a complicated experience, right? To look in the mirror at yourself naked is a complicated experience. To look in the mirror at yourself naked when you're told what gender is in relation to your anatomy is a complicated experience. So in that picture, and even with the other one with the halo, it is very easy for me to love being out in the woods and finding it beautiful, even though it does have all the death and all the bones and literal shit everywhere. And all of that, I am enamored. It's not challenging to find it beautiful and inspiring and beloved. So to reflect the landscape when I am looking at some version of a thing, it's at least a step towards trying to look at myself with that same grace. Yeah.
And you are very successful.
Oh, thank you. Well, I feel like that's probably where we're at with time. Yes? Okay, great.